Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Ralph Cantav on Mix 94.7 FM. I hope that you've had a good afternoon so far. This afternoon, I have here with me an architect, someone who is also very passionate about innovation. And so, I think in this discussion this afternoon, we're going to be speaking of some stuff that, of course, concern our island, but even in a grander scale, talking about energy as well, climate change and the like. And so I have here with me Mr. Damien Richardson. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for being on the program.
Yes. Good afternoon, Ralph. Thank you again for having me. I was here one time before. Yes. It was good. And today, I think it's going to be interesting because we are going to be talking, about one of my passions. My first passion, though, is Jesus and God, and I want to also make sure we put that at the front, that without God, without Jesus in my life, a lot of the things that are happening now is actually a result of walking structurally with Him.
Indeed.
And then from there, all of the different experiences that have happened, the great people that I've met, and the opportunities that I've had over time. It's really interesting what's been happening. A nice adventure that I've been on up to now.
Okay, great. Yes, indeed, you've been here before, but like many of us, you're not limited to just one title. There's more to you, and so you're not here in the capacity of chairman of the Social Economic Council. So that's just a disclaimer I want to make, because there are persons who be like, okay, but I know this guy.
Yes,
correct.
But
just to ensure that.
That's right. So today the main topic is going to be about architecture. My position as the chairman of the SER, the Social Economic Council. I'm an independent member there, and I'm also now the chairman. But at this time, me and you, we're going to be talking at lib concerning my passion.
Good. Yeah, just for the sake of a disclaimer. So, to start off, I'm definitely curious if you could tell us a bit about yourself, and also what inspired you to get into this field.
Just as a background, my grandfather was involved in building. He was involved with the building of actually DV, Little Bay, back in the day. And that somehow, some way also had some influence on my mother, who inspired her to become also a builder. And her brothers, and most of them are builders, or creative in some way. And my mother, for many years, over 50 years, 55 years, has been in construction and building. And at some point within that trajectory, she was building one of the buildings, and she had an architect who was there drawing out some stuff in the living room. And I was looking at the drawings, and we would be going back and forth to the site. And I think at some point, when the building started to be built, it became interesting to me to notice that you could have something on paper. And I think the inspirational moment came when I realized that you can, in a sense, capture space. How do you shape? You can draw it out, but that you're able then also to put some walls and windows and stuff around space, and you can actually capture space. That was for me crazy to see and realize. And then with that being as a core, it started to then evolve from there to become more and more of what. So I've always actually been interested in architecture for many years, but I think the early, from since the crib, as my mother would say, I was already drawing with whatever was there, So I was always drawing, but the architecture part came later, where it became really something that I wanted to do. So for most of my life, that was one of the things. And as I told you earlier too, I was also very passionate about dance, the creative arts. So I think in my architecture, that's my way of expressing myself. In that form.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you're a form of art.
Yes.
Where do you study as well, by the way?
Well, I started here on St. Martin because I passed for Marvel at Milton Peters College. But I was well, my mother, we discussed, I didn't do LTS because of the technical part of it. There you deal with metal and electric, and you deal also with the carpentry. So for me, it was about learning from the beginning, So I did LTS. I graduated there, top of the class. I worked with a teacher there at the time, Mr. Peterson, Claudwick Peterson, and up to today, we're very, very good friends.
Nice.
And Mr. Peterson has done a lot of work here in St. Martin for many years, Mediterranean style and this style, that style. So he's very, very good friend. And at that time, I was just a student, doing my drawings and getting familiar with the basics of architecture. And when I graduated there, I transferred. I could have gone to MTS and then gone to Curacao, and because at that time we didn't have another level here in St. Martin, you would have to go to another island. So, but at that moment, I opted to go to the States because I thought I'm going to go to the States and study there, do my architecture there, and then actually live in the States, But as I begin to move, I went to Florida Academy, which was then was a high school, junior ROTC training, with an accent on aeronautical stuff. It was near to Cape Canaveral where the spaceships are being launched, and really it was a really good time also. I did American football. I did, drill team. American football was just something that I had to do.
Yeah,
you go to America, I had to play American football.
Yeah, you had to understand it too. Yeah.
It was fun. It was really a lot of fun. I did running back, I did track and field, things like that. And then once I graduated there, I went to Palm Beach Community College because my uncle and aunt lived in Florida. They were missionaries there. And while there at Palm Beach Community College, I did a couple of years, did my Associates in Arts in architecture. The focus was on architecture. And then I transferred to FAMU. Now, transferring to FAMU, I went there first in the summer to see if I could get in and what the requirements were and what was it like, And at that time, St. Martin didn't have no relationship with FAMU.
Yeah, like they do now.
Now, So we had a partnership where the fees are a lot less.
Yes.
Now, back then, it was nearly 3 times as much you had to pay as a student. But basically, transferring from Palm Beach Community College to FAMU was a massive, massive wake-up call. Because when I arrived there and I saw the kind of work the students were doing and the work that was being produced there, I was like, whoa, that's a whole nother level. And I'm coming up there with my portfolio thinking I have something. And I'm doing good work at Palm Beach Community College and had a really good time there with the theory and history, American history and whatever other kind of histories, European history, etc. But the artistic part, where I thought I had it, I had to actually reset myself. So I had to go back home and re-prepare my portfolio to get into that university because they were checking your portfolio to get in. And luckily, I was able to reshape it in a way that was presentable enough to get in. So I got in, and I spent 1 year at. I did 3 years at Palm Beach Community College, 1 year at the FAMU, basically, and then while there, we had professors from Harvard, Princeton, Berkeley, Texas. All these top professors, teachers were there, and you're going through all these critiques and stuff like that. And also, they were the master's class students, and you would be there working sometimes morning, noon, and night. Because my motto at that time, interesting, in and at the American universities, it was really a competitive context.
Yeah, that's true.
And the competition always seemed to be about you against me, And I met a guy from Maryland and another guy from the Bahamas and myself, and we together decided, you know what, we're not going to compete.
Yeah.
We're going to compete against ourselves, So if he see me lacking or I see him lacking in his a skill or ability, we would push each other. Hey, you could do better than that. You were trying this and that, but why don't you try that? So we would try to find the best in each other. So I learned actually there how to encourage each other, rather than looking at yourself. Encourage the other. How can you help them grow themselves to become a better, stronger person in what they're doing? So that was really a wake-up call, I think, in America for me, because everything around me was about competing against someone else rather than encouraging and building the other. And I think also one of the things then that became apparent was to see if I had to transfer to go to Holland, because remember at that time my whole mind is thinking I'm going to stay in America. And I was at FAMU, and from there I can go to another university and continue from there or finish right there. But I met this gentleman at the master's level, and he was explaining, you can go to Holland. And in Holland, I said, which is the top university? He said, TU Delft. I never heard of the school at the time. And so I checked into it. And from there, I started to make my trajectory to go to TU Delft. Now, getting into the TU Delft in Holland, which is now, of course, I know it's the number 3 in the world. But to get in there, you needed to have your HTS or your VWO, and you have to have your top training to get in. And then separate from that, you need to have ready to be, in terms of your training, ready to get in to do what you got to do. So I transferred finally after checking the issues because of the costs and everything. So I went to St. Martin, started to prepare to go to Holland, and the transition from St. Martin, from the States to Holland now, because everything is Dutch, and you must understand that my Dutch was down to zero, because what am I? I'm not going to study in Holland anymore. I'm going to be in America. So with that, I had to begin to learn Dutch again. So I found out from, which are the students that are going to Holland. I set up some meetings at the library and organized some topics. And all of the students, because one of the weaknesses for St. Martin students was also that they don't communicate much in Dutch. So with that,
to the classroom, you pure English.
Right. So I organized with the students some subjects, and we met together, and we agreed that we're going to speak Dutch together. So we had a good bit of afternoons where we just spoke Dutch, different subjects. So any student can come, whether HAVO, MAVO, or VWO, could come and sit down, and we would have a nice talk with each other and discuss stuff in Dutch, And that was my way also of getting into it. But now I arrived to Holland, and it was another massive wake-up call, because getting into that university was not that simple, as I thought. I mean, you're just transferring to another school, okay. You check your grades, you check your work, and then you go ahead and get certain exemptions because you already did 4 years of architecture stuff. So then you get in. It wasn't that way. So I did, they call it inschaling, or they call it evaluation committee. It was 6 to 9 professors who check your work to see if you can get in. And I did that. And while doing that, as I'm presenting my work, the professor stopped me and said, Mr. Richardson, just a point of order. Is this your work? Is this my work? I'm like, huh? What do you mean, is this my work? I'm getting 9s and 10s at FAMU with the type of work I'm doing, and I'm coming here now to get into your university. But remember, I'm getting into the TU Delft, and at that time, I'm not aware of how esteemed the university is. I'm just passionate. I'm doing what I got to do, just getting into the university. So I present my stuff. We're still good, right, in terms of topic?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I
have my needle weaving through what you're saying for the next questions.
So I'm here now, presenting my stuff, trying to get into the university. And I say, you know what? So they tell me, no, Mr. Richardson, after I present everything, they say, you know what? You're going to have to start from scratch. I said, what? Start from scratch? I said, guys, anyway, I went back to the drawing board, came back at them a second time with my list of my work that I did, line it up against their projects, what they have here in the school, and said, listen, comparatively, I'm able to get in based on this, and this is the level I should be at. Second round, knocked me back down again.
Wow.
Third time, I went back at them, presented the work now, and the professors and the universities that are coming there to give me my work, as well as their levels and the professors that they have, to compare the two, and the differences between university work, etc. And then so that was the third one. On the third one, they said, oh, we're going to give you 3 modules in the first year, and then you can start. Remember, in Holland, it's based on propedeuse. So if you don't finish the first year, it's about finances as well.
Correct.
So I went back a 4th time. So on the 4th time now, I discussed certain things with them, and then finally, on the 4th time, they gave me 1 year free, the propedeuse, and 2 modules in the second year. I said, you know what? Thank you, guys. No problem. Now I start. Now, I'm beginning to work at the university, realizing at FAMU, there, within 1 week, you're producing like a beast. I'm sleeping in the studio. My studio, you have a table, you're doing your work. I'm sleeping right underneath there, morning, noon, and night, because you got to produce your work. You got to get a result within a week. Bam, bam, bam. You know, in 1 month, different product. Production level is high, you know. So I'm there now at the university. Of course, looking back, I'm realizing, hey, it's a different type of context, different kind of university, different kind of
culture,
stride, etc. But at that time, for me, it was like I'm constricted. I can't breathe here, you know. So I say, you know what, this place is too slow for me. You know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I made a mistake. I came to this university to quote unquote. But I think I made a mistake.
That shows you the difference from, American culture is very fast-paced. And sometimes it's all about the sale, not necessarily structure.
Yes. So this element drove me now to go up to the PhD professors. And the PhD professors, there was a top floor, and they discussed. So I found one of them that I could talk to. I explained my drama. And at some point in the discussion, he said, you know what, we have here at the university something called a ZOP. I said, a soap? Because my Dutch English, you a soap? I said, what is a soap? He said, no, a ZOP. He said, a ZOP? I said, yeah. He said, a zelf-opgezette project, self-set-up projects. Now, he said, you can create your own university inside of this university. I said, what? He said, yes, you can choose your own subjects, you can choose your own professors, you can choose your own students, you can create your own way of studying at this university. You don't have to follow this curriculum. You can create your own curriculum. I said, what? He said, yes, this is possible. I said, well, you know what? I think that's what I'm going to do. So I begin to frame my my university training through defining subjects that I would study at the university, and worked with other students who had also was interested in doing ZOPs. So we did projects all over the place, South Africa, here, there, competitions, you name it. I really had a good time at the university at the end of the day. And early on, I began working on I was, again, surprisingly, my master's, when I did my bachelor's, did my master's.
At the same school?
So, yes, at the same school.
Okay.
I could have done it based on the theater. I was going to do the theater of St. Martin as my master's, but I chose
the
Performing Arts Center. Yeah. But then I chose to do, because I realized that if I'm here at this top university now, if I'm going to do something, it has to be relevant not only for what I think St. Martin only needs, but if we do something, I have to do something on a scale that can be not only for us, but for the region and for the world. So I said, maybe I need to look at what I was thinking about doing for my PhD, which was looking at jump points, setting up a logistics infrastructure for the world. and doing jump points to go into orbit and beyond. Now, sounds like a dream, but that was what I was interested in at the time. After being inspired by the space stuff in Florida, and also young dreaming and thinking about creating creative stuff, flying objects and yachts, boats, whatever. So it was always an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
So I say, you know what? Here I am at this spot.
But not impossible.
I think, you know what? I should use this opportunity. So it took me 5 years to finish my thesis, my master's, but it was then my PhD proposal that I turned into my master's. And with that, I worked with the VROM Holland, Spatial Planning of Holland, which focuses on long-term planning, 30, 40 years in advance as to how to organize and grow your country, or even 50 years sometimes. So I worked with regional planning, space tourism, and call it global logistics, as in terms of how to define my architecture project. So with that, to do the project, I needed to understand about space logistics, airports, cruise industry, trains, fast ships, you name it, all the logistical
Deep dives,
elements,
basically.
all of it, so that you could grow your thought. Also, one thing that had to come in was entertainment art as to how to present your material, because I had to study the 3D modeling, and because we had to animate at that time. It wasn't big at the time, but now it's without that you can't do your stuff, but it wasn't as big then. So I graduated there with a 10 in honors because of the type of product that we produced and promoted. I did it with a friend of mine out of Poland, Piotr Poniatowski, a good friend. We spent 5 years, like I said, working on that project, and it was a really, really great adventure experience in Holland. And then from there, I worked with the government, with the university, teaching the master's program with a friend of mine, and then also with Provincie Zuid-Holland, with defining a concept for their future areas for hooks of art and some other stuff. And then from there, I was actually recruited to come to St. Martin to deal with the zoning for the island, to be the head of VROM, spatial planning here in St. Martin.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll get back on that, because my next question was going to go to that point exactly.
Okay, cool.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the news behind the news with Ralph Contav. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Mr. Damien Richardson, architect, passionate, about innovation and the world of energy and whatnot. And so I'm glad you gave the introduction you give, particularly because, having all this experience and being so, and I don't say that in a bad way, but idealistic, but in terms of, having a vision for, the field that you're in and so forth. I can imagine how excited or energetic you may have been wanting to come back home. And, we all, many of us have that in us, come back home. And you didn't want to change the world, but you especially want to change St. Martin, because there's so many things that, could use some tweaking. And so in your case, you were actually recruited to come back home. And so I'm curious on your experience being back here, and what were, I guess, some of the things you identified that you definitely realized needed an overhaul that would have improved particularly our infrastructure, our spatial planning more so on the island.
Yeah, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that I did the ZOPs, so the self-setup projects. And interestingly enough, at the time, going back now, it shows a little bit my age, with Hurricane Lewis, at the time, it was in 1995, and once that happened, I worked and organized to have. I had just started at the university actually, and I organized then to do a ZOP about St. Martin, self-setup project, and I grew then a group of 18 students who would then do a research redevelopment strategy for Philipsburg and for St. Martin. And why I'm saying that is the prelude as to why I came back to this and what I thought I could do to help St. Martin. So with that, I organized with the professors and everything to do a concept strategy, just to brainstorm St. Martin, and then to bring out some of the things that are there for the island so that they can have it as a tool to help us as a people move forward. So with that, at that time, Junie was, I think Lewis Brown was over Vrome at the time, and I came and I did my stage internship in a sense there. And while doing that, I also then organized the Greater Phillipsburg exhibition. And during the Greater Phillipsburg exhibition, it took a week. And during that week of exhibition of activities, I invited the schools, the businesses, the governments, everything like that. And every day was set for a different group to come. And we did it at the auditorium. And at that moment, I then had all of the work that was prepared in Holland sent down by KLM in the containers, so that we would then be able to make this presentation to St. Martin and inspire the young people to look at a better future, a different future for our island and whatever else. And while here, I presented at the University of St. Martin. I did some classes, went to the schools, talked to the schools, things like that. Now, I had a setback. In coming to St. Martin to do the exhibition, there were certain costs involved, and I had already prepared in advance that there was going to be some funding from the government because of the redevelopment and funds or whatever else that was happening at the time that would cover some of those costs. But I came to St. Martin and went to that location to find out more about, okay, how is the funds going to come so we can get the stuff here and do this thing, And guess what? It was repurposed. So basically, everything that was planned was then shut down. So I won't say it's the similar to what happened at the beginning of my university training, but it put me in a position now to decide, what am I going to do? So I had to choose. I chose at the time because of my knowing about, again, the history of my mother, the history of my family, and everybody who really are pressed through, So my mind immediately clicked on, how do I press through to get to the next place? So I created a A4, and basically what I did is I went to the community. I went to the island, I went to the different businesses, I went to different individuals, and asked them to fund, and I defined the different funding elements that needed money, and I went to KLM and I asked them to send the stuff down to sponsor it, to bring it for me. So we were able to facilitate all the different expenses with local funding. So the companies, so St. Martin actually did cover the expenses for the exhibition, the Greater Phillipsburg exhibition at the time, but it took going out there to make it happen. And once that happened, we were able to do the package, the presentation, and so with over time you find out who was inspired or not. And years later, I'm now at the Social Economic Council, and surprisingly, then SG Gerard Richardson said to me, "Yeah, I was at that exhibition that you presented your stuff, and really it was really interesting for me." And blah blah blah. He talked about what happened at the time. So I don't know who in the community and who all got inspired, but God knows why. You just have to do your part,
right,
and God's going to do what He has to do with that seed to bring it up. Right. So that incident about exhibition and the Greater Phillipsburg exhibition drove me for many years thinking about our island, what we can do, how we can grow it, and stuff like that. So once I had the opportunity, I found out that there was an open vacancy for that position to come and be as the island manager. They asked me to come. And within that, I had to then, of course, prepare, do a lot of reading on the policies, regulations, etc. for St. Martin. And that position was to be the policymaker and the building permits manager. So you're doing a bit of both. So you're managing the policies, the regulations that define St. Martin and its future, as well as managing every building permit that has to go out of be put on the field,
Department, yeah.
So that position, I think, at that time, only for a few years that happened, because after when I left, maybe a couple months later, it then went into just splitting the two, permits And
Around
then,
what year was
for
that?
me. Sorry?
Around what year was that?
This was in 2007, 2008,
Okay.
when I was there. Yeah?
Okay.
2 years.
All right. Interesting.
And now during that time, when I came back, the first thing I did was I think Louis Brown was working for projects and program projects at the time, and I just went immediately to him, and I asked him the question, what does he believe is the biggest, most important issue for St. Martin? Because for my internship, I was also working on the zoning at the time. He said, well, you know what? St. Martin's biggest problem is we don't have any zoning. The only part of the island that is zoned, that is defined, is lowlands. Other than that, the rest of the island is not actually defined programmatically. They had a lot of planning permits for different areas, pieces, so clusters, pieces, areas of St. Martin, but that the whole island is zoned, it didn't exist. So he said, if you are able to get that in place, then you would have helped St. Martin go forward, because that is our biggest problem. So with that, the moment I got into the position, that was one of my priorities, to focus on developing the zoning for the island. And that meant the development plans. But to do that, you needed to have a basis to justify growing that development plan. So to do that, I reached out to some of my partners, friends in Holland who had already graduated, doing their work, working in different companies, and with that, encouraged them to come to St. Martin to do and help with that research. And they came, they spent months here doing, we call it jollifications, going to the different communities, getting information, had all the different departments involved, scanning the different communities, because what we had to do in essence is to develop a research base to justify the development plans.
Yeah, naturally.
And that basis, eventually the result of it was called Mosaic, a world within an island, the Mosaic, because of all the different pieces and cultures and dynamics that are happening on St. Martin. So it was to encourage and to understand that, and then from there to define a research package that looked at the different communities, and then from that now, the island can then, quote unquote, policy-wise, develop the zoning for the island. What came out of it was the 12 development plans for the island. And those, in a sense, were sent to the Island Council at a time, and all 12, normally it's done one at a time. But what I did was organize with the team that we sent all 12 in one shot. So we sent all 12, and all 12 got signed off. Now, remember, 10-10-10 is when St. Martin became autonomous and stuff. So let's say for maybe 2 years or so, nothing happened. It was just, it's done, it's signed, but nothing was going anywhere. I think within the context of island becoming autonomous, some of the 2 or 3 things that needed to be done was then that you need to also have your island zoned, organized. So what are we going to do? So they reached back and had to look at the development plans and begin to then work on them. Are the development plans completed to date? No. But are they in place? Yes. And Royal Haskoning is one of the companies out of Rotterdam that is working on the development plans and helping St. Martin define them more technically, because with the development plans you have to then go into each community and have discussions with the community, agree with each other as to how it's going to come and become, and then from there you take it into another level where you then turn it into a policy regulation, regulating every part, and then from there legalize it, make it a law. And then from there you're able then to activate the different pros and cons for each community.
I have a question for you based on that. May be simple, but I asked that just for clarity, considering like particularly anything, let's say that deals with public works, infrastructure, and so forth, is always seen as technical. So getting that with let's say a grassroots understanding, factoring ecosystems and how communities function. Really, why do we need zoning, and how does that impact a particular space or a community?
A good question. Worldwide, and I'm saying worldwide because if you go back in the history of zoning, developing communities, etc., you're going back. We could even go back to Africa, go back to Rome, go back to all of these ancient civilizations, and from place to place. But as time passed, people started putting a quote unquote a price, a value on space, or what people realize is that the more and more people came together, they had to organize how they interact within a context because of hygiene, because so different elements, which is a natural phenomenon, had to be organized. So for instance, if we're going to have a meeting in a room, somebody's going to say, yeah, let's just have a meeting. But wait a second, to have a meeting, then we got to organize before having that meeting. So this is just an example. So if I'm going to organize, that means somebody got to make sure there's a room, make sure there are chairs in that room, make sure there's going to be light, make sure there's internet access, make sure there's maybe water or whatever else. So there's a whole logistics are there toilets? You got to make sure that all the logistics are there for you to facilitate the meeting. Even me and you having this meeting, you have the mic, you have the online access, you have the infrastructure in place to make sure it can happen. So with zoning of an island or a place, it might seem simple, but the moment you have people coming together, and as they saw over time, it wasn't that you have small cities. Cities begin to mushroom because more and more people want to be together because of the economic dynamic of what happens in those places when people come together in the marketplace, as they would say. Right now, there's a disbursement going on where people are going more in the suburbs. And because of the online phenomena of the internet. So the internet, you would say, maybe is a good thing, because it's helping to create a dispersion, because for some time now the world has been going towards the city and the urban. Most of the data is saying that 95% of the world will be urbanized, but because of the internet, the Wi-Fi, people can now stay home.
Can retreat to the ruins. Yeah.
And also there have been a lot of analysis going on, talking about, let's say, certain communities in Africa and in Asia and other places that, listen, even in India, that if you can provide an online opportunity, then the communities don't have to go into the city. They can stay where they are, grow an industry, grow businesses, and have that experience and lifestyle that they're accustomed to, instead of having to change their dynamic and sometimes be alienated from their cultural experience. So now you're having this duality where people are urban and suburban at the same time. So for us, it would be, for instance, this idea that a lot of our young people, some of them right now, a big transitions happening. A lot of people doing things online, doing their masters, doing their bachelors, doing their associate, everything online. Even their doctorate, some of them are doing. Now, with that, they won't have to travel to this country or that country or whatever other country. They go there for experience, but in general, you can do it from home. So a lot of times people leave their context and they don't come back. So one of the massive migration concerns is people leave, don't come back. So the knowledge and capacity building for that country is gone because they are not here anymore. So if you're able, so the internet is able to make it possible that you can grow knowledge while the capacity of your island is able to grow too, because they are here, they didn't leave. Now the opportunity for that person who is in some job right now to excel and to go to the next level is sometimes a challenge, or to innovate and create their own business venture and become and have a different experience in the island or on the island. And I think that is happening a lot more now. So with zoning, that was your initial question. So the reason for zoning is to help organize the group of people that are coming together, because you're talking about metropoles that are over 10,000. Some of them now are defined over 10 million. So one of the biggest cities in our region here is in Mexico. It's one of the massive urban contexts that you can think of. We have a lot of big urban experiences here in the region that we might not know, but it has effects on us, whether we like it or not. The spin-offs from such a massive urban metropole that's happening, it has residual impact, whether it's about people, merchandise, and or experiences that are nearby that are impacting us in our manufacturing factors, etc.
Essentially, yeah. Okay, I appreciate the response, because what I wrote down here while he was speaking is proper zoning can empower communities, and number 2, regulate logistics and resource in the community. I think that's fair, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So now thinking about what you shared in terms of, of course, while you were there for a long stint, the Greater Phillipsburg initiative.
Yes.
One of the questions I did have here, among many, is I think I have to bring you back on concerning time. But this one I think I definitely like to ask you, because I know that you designed and pitched an idea for Parliament Building on St. Martin. Because up to now we don't have our own Parliament building, but I'm curious on your vision for that. But also, think of Phillipsburg, because of course, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, we have climate change to consider, rising sea levels.
Yes.
We have and Phillipsburg is just that strip right between two bodies of water, but also understanding condensity and not even possible, but definite changes to come in our economy, because we already know what type of shops make up town. Tourists are definitely looking forward to more experiences, matters that they can use to share with their family, that say, hey, this like a wow factor.
Right.
So, one, considering your patron presentation on the Parliament building, but I guess my question really is, if we were to redesign Phillipsburg, what would that be like? And I ask that, it may be kind of grand, but I think it's something that's needed, that we can redesign town, not to make it like a New York City, but in a way that stands out.
Yes. Good question. And for you to also understand, for years now, St. Martin, and more importantly Phillipsburg, has been my muse as such. And one of the projections, conceptualized realities that I've done, and even at that time for the Greater Phillipsburg exhibition, I proposed a density study that would look at a proposal that would consider what could Phillipsburg look like in the future in terms of becoming more dense or creating. Now, back then, based on the knowledge that I had, I proposed a couple of higher buildings here, there, within the back part of more or less where the ring road is going to be. But as time passed, I've evolved the thought where let's say, if we look at the Parliament building, for now, in terms of the fact that St. Martin does not have, we have a Parliament, where we have our meetings and stuff like that right now, but in terms of the cost, it became something that we had to look at as to how to define that in a new way. And the fact that after the Hurricane Irma, the building was gone, the old government building, is to say, okay, how could we repurpose that area? So looking at where the post office is, looking at where the old government building is, and looking at the Clan-La-Vega Square, the idea there, which I presented actually in 2019, is to create then the Parliament Plaza, and within that context, create a canopy-like experience where you would have then in a reference back to the industry that made St. Martin what it is. It's the salt industry. And because at that time, the Greater Phillipsburg area, you could say, was a machine, a salt industry machine. That's where all these alleys existed, 18 alleys, to move salt from the salt pond onto those ships, and we were the producer, the supplier of New York and other places at the time. So the salt industry was big, and we had, for instance, the steam engine here at the salt factory by Foga that was crushing the salt to the point where it was so soft and unique, because that steam engine was revolutionary in its day because we were the only ones that had it in the Caribbean at the time. So St. Martin, I say, is a place of innovation, is a place of creating something new and looking at things from a totally different perspective. The things that the Greater Phillipsburg was involved with in terms of the salt pond, with the fresh pond, the Long Wall Road, the Rolandas Canal, that engineering that took place, the technology that was applied to St. Martin was incredible. But over time, we've lost sight, I think, of what and who we are. And as much as we say that we want to embrace our cultural heritage, if you look at the Foga, a lot of people don't even know where the Foga is or what it is.
True, very true.
And I think we do need to have clarity as to what it was. And then from there are different ways that you could bring that cultural landscape or cultural context back in a different way. You don't want to go back, but you want to create something new and different, So we can do something there. So now going back to the Parliament building. So the Parliament building would be a reference to the cultural heritage, the salt crystal that would be on the top. And inside of that would then be, quote unquote, then the Parliament meetings. I mean, I have a clip online where I present and talk about a little bit about the Parliament building. And that's something that if anyone want to ask, they can find out some more about that. But why I thought it was important is because in that way, the amount of money that we're spending on the Parliament building that we have now, the one that we're using, let's say about average about $100,000, we would be able then to over 20 years, we would have a loss of about 20-something million, opposed to if we were able to develop this facility, the Parliament Plaza. You're talking about commercial spaces. You're talking about vendors for retail. You're talking about having a plaza that could be used for the community to have regional, international, local events, having more than 10,000 persons in a canopied area. Then you're having the Parliament meetings, and then also other community meeting halls, etc. there. So in a sense, giving Phillipsburg a center, a core. And that was what this Parliament building is about. And introducing, in a sense, an architectural language in the Caribbean, because there's only maybe 2 or 3 other buildings in the Caribbean that can speak of this level of presence. And that's what this Parliament building would do, would put us on the map globally. Because that's what architecture, in essence, have the power to do. Do you want to be put on the map? Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, why should we minimize the quality or the character of who we are when that is who you are? So I think it's an opportunity for us to really put ourselves globally on the map. And if we have persons in our community, I'm here, you understand? And we have other persons here that if we are collaborating together, we can create something really wonderful, interesting, and the fact that we have personalities that are not only regional, but we are global now. We're not just St. Martin on the island. We have a global presence with the #1 yachting destination in the Caribbean. And we have a lot of other things happening for St. Martin that makes us want and should be proud of what we have become over these years, and we should find a way to represent that, and that's one way to do that. Now, the second part of your question about redefining Phillipsburg, there've been many gestures over time, the boardwalk, to reignite some activities and different things in Phillipsburg. But as you say, if you look at what's happening within the region globally with global warming, the world protects itself. Every nation, every city, they're looking at their best interests. Nobody is looking at, how are we going to protect the Caribbean? In essence, it's like, that's your business. It's not my business, it's your business. So as a region, we might be too focused on one thing. It's like, you're looking at one thing and then you turn around, oh shucks, there's an avalanche coming. There's a tidal wave coming. There's this coming. So we know what our stresses are, our shocks are, and we need to, as a region, begin to think and begin to realize what we're up against. So I think whether it was smart or not smart, or God, wisdom, or whatever it was at the time, is that I didn't just say, hey, let me just study my theater and get that. I studied global logistics, regional plan, space tourism, but I said, you know what? And Obama said it, be of purpose, have a purpose, that you're relevant for your community, so I think that is one of the things that is my responsibility, to be relevant. So over the years, I'm not waiting for someone to tell me, hey, you should try that, check that out. I have the knowledge. I can work on it. So I'm just doing what I have to do. I'm sketching, conceptualizing. People say, oh, he's a dreamer. He's thinking out of the box. He's way out there. He's gone. He's flying away, But at the end of the day, is Elon Musk flying away, repurposing rockets? Are other thinkers out of the box? That's what it takes. For us, we have to be out of the box to protect ourselves and to look at a new and better future. So regionally, I think over time I realized that we need to come up with a thought, for example, of how to protect ourselves from hurricanes, to get energy from hurricanes. How can you protect the whole island? And I'm speaking kind of fast on the subject, but maybe we can, again, like you say, continue at another time to talk a little bit more about it. But it's, again, the idea of Phillipsburg and how do you organize to protect the whole city from tidal rise, or how do you create a second urban context within the same area so that in the case or event that one gets destroyed, that you're ready for a new and continued reality. So we know that the tidal rise is going to be about 6 meters, 3 to 6 meters they say, but at the end of the day, you never know.
You don't control nature, so exactly.
We know that a certain low-lying areas in the region is going to be wiped out. So if you don't start preparing and organizing yourself, so now you might say, okay, that's going to be an expensive treat. Okay, but evaluate what would be alternative scenarios for your future in terms of a region, in terms of an island. And these are things I think we need to look at as a people. Don't run from it. It's coming. Whether you're going to deal with it or your next generation is going to deal with it, but we have to, as a people, look at it. And I think if you have people in the community who can help define that, we should brainstorm and start working and looking at these things. But that idea of Phillipsburg, and I made different concepts for that future of Phillipsburg, high rise. I have an idea where you have buildings that when the hurricane is coming, it collapses into each other. So it closes down like a flower. It can open up. And then when the hurricanes come, it closes down and closes off the whole Phillipsburg like a vault. So it closes it, click, and the high-rise buildings that are getting energy and stuff like that comes down and click, shuts down. But it protects the whole island, the whole Phillipsburg area.
Interesting.
Okay. Robotics.
So yeah, it's a final question. Welcome back. Oops. Modulation, a little try. 1, 2. Okay, good. Welcome back, everyone. This is the news behind the news. And so my final question for you, Mr. Richardson, is considering, I look at my experience that I had through Irma. When Lewis came, I was only 2 months old, so I can't talk about that. But the thing about Irma that stood out to me is the fact that, so I grew up in town, in Dunk Street, and the house that we grew up in is over 60 years old, and then the house we stayed in during Irma was by our neighbor, and their house is what at that time was 110 years old. Nothing happened to those homes. Funny enough, it was a new addition that they built to the old house is what got damaged. And I of course I look at and often I would look at various old time homes and these houses have feared every hurricane, whether it's the the famous Hurricane Donna that was also a bad hurricane on
Yes.
St. Martin. I forget what year. I think it was in the 60s.
60s. Mhm.
Okay, in the 60s. And so, you know,
60s,
in talking to you too, you know, you see, architecture is interesting because, you know, for ages, man has been building. And architecture, as you eloquently stated, you know, it plays a role in one's national identity, a cultural heritage. And so what I'm curious about is, you know, your take on ways in which, I guess, with those styles of building, they've built with nature in mind. You get what I'm saying? But also building with resilience. And and have you ever looked into even the way those homes are built that, strong hurricane like Irma didn't even necessarily create much damage to it?
No, good question also, Ralph. Yes, I've looked at that. I remember one of my professors telling me, you know, hey, I asked him the question, how do you deal with hurricanes and building for hurricanes? He said, he made a joke. He said, you know what, you take 3 coconut trees and tie yourself in the middle of those 3 coconut trees, and when the hurricane comes, the wind will blow those coconut trees different directions, and you will be in the middle. Hopefully you survive. You know, I said, so how do you actually solve the problem? He said, hurricanes, that's one of the hardest things to solve, you know. But what you notice is today in technology in the world, everybody's building with concrete. They say put a concrete roof, concrete walls, and I do appraisals as well. And I appraise buildings, normal buildings, high commercial, whatever, you know. And at that time, I appraised the building, and one of the buildings was solid concrete, good windows, good frame, good everything. It was built to withstand. But surprisingly, the hurricane pulled out the windows, went into that building, and when you talk about scraping a building clean, it's as it were scraped everything out of the paint, out of the walls and the sides and everything, just sucked everything out of that building. So in essence, that's what it did to that particular property. Now, the courthouse and the Methodist church, certain damages happened, but the forces were able to equally go down into the ground. So the forces came against the building, but it was evenly distributed to the point where it went down. So maybe the pieces that were hanging out got ripped off, and some pieces that were not tied locked down properly. But the buildings themselves, the wooden buildings, the structure how it was put together, was able to withstand the force. And this was one of the most forceful hurricanes ever in the region that you can think of. So the fact that they were able to withstand it. Now, also some buildings in the community were able to withstand a hurricane. Now, so it is possible using history to learn from history and then build to protect your property from hurricanes. You know, and right now I have my office. What I did and try to use, because people say, oh, you have to build like a block with a small windows to make sure that the wind, and other people say, yeah, build in a way and open certain windows to let the air flow through the building, you know, so that it don't have resistance. So this balance of what to and what not to do is something. Now, I realized that I could get into that, how you call it, a water spout of options for hurricane do this and hurricane do that. But because now of my training and what I was exposed to, I realized in analyzing globally and looking at our regional problem and that the fact that it's been going on for centuries, I realized that other countries are, when I say resilient, but I consider it to be presilient. Prepare in advance, because if you already know it's coming, you have to be in advance prepared to do something. So I believe that what we're doing now, what we have to do is to come at it from a different angle and look at the positives of what you can do and should do for the future of developing your. Don't protect the quote unquote the one flower. You know, say, oh, I'm going to protect this flower from the damage, and then the whole field is gone. So basically you protect one house or two houses, and then the rest of the community is gone, the infrastructure is gone. And so even when you get back to it, you don't spend billions of dollars for your island or region, but then the object can't function because you're by yourself. The building can't function because it's by itself. So it still has to wait for the rest of the island to come back to life. So for me, is we need to be a more resilient region or context and start thinking on a different scale, because we can't just protect the flower. We have to protect the whole field so that we can be more, how you call it now, to look at how do we get energy, how do we work from a perspective of not saying, oh, after we got destroyed, then we will not get destroyed. We will be strong. We will be able to go beyond this storm and have a different way of thinking. Because many years, sometimes we're busy with recovery. Sometimes how many years we're trying to recover from the hurricane. If we spend years recovering,
and that is so detrimental. Even just for an individual, you live in a state of recovery. Your mindset is right to way that
it's traumatized.
It's
a traumatizing
give you
moment.
A poverty mindset.
Right. Now, understanding something though, that from assessing things also, different regions of the world, they evolve faster, surprisingly, because of going through catastrophes. So, but even going through the catastrophes help them to learn skills that they can become smarter, better, etc. At what's going on. So we have gone through this now as a region for how many years, centuries. At some point, we do need to ask the question and change our strategy, to do something different. And I think we are now at that place where we are asking the question. Well, I'm asking the question, and is to then begin to evolve and understand what needs to happen in order for us to be in a different place. Maybe not in 10 years, 5 years, but we need to start looking at it so that in the future, our generations will not be facing this similar, quote-unquote, uncertainties that are out there,
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So I would like to thank you so much for coming to the program. There were still a good bit of questions that we didn't get to ask, but, there'll definitely be a next time. So I appreciate it. Any final words?
No, at the moment, we, like you say, we will continue another time.
Cool.
And at this time, I think we've shared a good bit of issues, and I think it's helpful in terms of the information. And I think, and again, I want to just tell you, appreciate for what you're doing as a person, bringing knowledge and exposing a lot of the different characters and personalities that are here on the island, and that's very interesting to know. And I think also through listening to some of the other interviews that you've had, I'm able to see, oh, this can happen or that can happen, or maybe we can network with that person. So I think being able to hear the interviews is helping to help us as an island see who's here, to know what you can or cannot do.
Definitely.
So that's really, really wonderful.
I appreciate that.
Doing.
Great. Thank you so much. And to our listeners and viewers, I hope that you also enjoy this conversation on the news behind the news. And do take care. And until tomorrow, goodbye.